Good morning. Today is Sunday, November 3rd, 2024. Welcome to meditation class. Let's start by setting our intention and aspiration, motivation by saying the four immeasurables. May all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all beings not be separated from the happiness that has never known suffering. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment, anger, and aversion. And when we say that, all beings means indeed all beings, all sentient beings. It's very much about the view of Buddhism, which acknowledges interdependence, impermanence, shunyata, which is they translates often as emptiness, but it's really a way of describing how we exist in an ultimate sense, which is interdependence, and that seeing the self as something separate and inherently existing is actually a delusion and just a very, very, very limited subjective point of view based on our own habitual tendencies and karma and sense perceptions and things like that. So making motivation for the benefit of all beings is acknowledging reality in the way it truly exists, if that makes sense. It's not about us and them when you're talking about the benefit of all beings. May all beings have happiness. It's not a thing about pity or, separation. It's about really acknowledging that kind of oneness of existence, no matter how separate we seem and apart we seem from the rest of the world. That's just a temporary, real, and diluted point of view. And it's important to remember that when you say that, when you say the four immeasurables, that's not just it's not just an abstract wish, or that there's a reality to it, that there's a real ultimate reality to what you're saying and what you're connecting to there. Last time we talked about our teacher Garchen Rinpoche, when he talks about Buddha is not the name of a man, Buddha is the name of mind. Or he'll say things like, when we're together, when we meditate, our minds are one, and over time I've learned that when he says the things that he said they're not metaphoric, they're not, wishful thinking or something. They're the truth as it really is. It's just takes a bit of expansion of our normal way of seeing to accept that, really, let alone understand it. And the four immeasurables is the same thing, I'm going to read something very simple about the nature of mind. And then we'll meditate, and then Victoria's going to speak. This is from a quote from the Karmapa, the 17th Karmapa. When we talk about the true nature of mind, when we say nature, it means the actual state, the actual situation that the mind is in. It's simply a matter of recognizing what is there, what is actually there. So sometimes what is tricky for us to understand is that the reason we have not recognized the true nature of our mind is not because it is too profound or too difficult. It is because it is too simple or too easy. The masters of meditation of the past say that we fail to recognize the true nature of mind because it is so simple that we fail to trust it. And in this class, when we do the practice of meditation and go into the certain techniques and we use the visualization of the mind like a sky, again, I mean, that is a metaphor, but the qualities that we're talking about are not metaphorical. You know, the qualities of limitless, spacious, stainless, clarity, um, those are not metaphorical. Those are not wishful thinking or something. That's the true nature of our mind. And um, meditation is a way of proving that to ourselves, because every time you sit down to meditate, that clarity, that openness, that like limitless, um, calm, sky-like nature of mind, that's always accessible and always there. And in a way, that's reminding us of the proof of our nature of the nature of our mind. It's not something that comes from the outside and it's up to chance whether or not we're going to get it, or it's Buddha's not going to give it to us, our Lama's not going to give it to us, Guru Rinpoche is not going to give it to us. We have it. We can't get rid of it. You can't damage it. You can be obscured from it if um, are lost in your own, projections and habitual patterns and things like that. But that the evidence is, you know, if you apply the correct techniques and you calm the mind, you have access to that. Um, it's important to remember that, and that should give you confidence in your own nature of mind. It's very important. Okay, with that, let's practice meditation. I'm going to get the timer going. I'm not going to do a review today, because we don't do them every week. Nick, if you want to put up in the chat the last which um, week YouTube on the YouTube channel, which is Michael Imperioli Meditation 101, where we have the last full review of the technique. So if you don't know it, you can go to the YouTube and, at your own pace, practice the technique and hear it. But for the benefit of those who attend regularly, I don't want to, take up our time doing that every week. So we're sitting in our posture on the cushion or in a chair. Our hips are in line or maybe above our knees. We're relaxing our body, but we're keeping a certain amount of erectness and alertness, suppleness. And remember that analogy of the guitar string having just enough tension to make a tone, not too slack, not too tight. Same thing with the body. Let's take a deep breath and let go. And now let's just focus on the breath. Okay. Here we go. Back to the breath. Focus your attention on where the air is moving, where the upper lip meets the nostrils. And when you become aware that your attention has been taken over by a thought, and you're following the thought, bring your attention back to the breath, back to the place where the breath moves, or apply the technique of watching the thought dissolve as if it's a cloud that has arisen in the sky or sky-like nature of mind, that limitless calm clarity, which is the mind's true nature, that simplicity. Remember, the goal is to not think, it's to work with the thoughts, it's to become aware of the thoughts as they arise. It's like waves on the ocean. They rise up, you notice them, let them go. And become aware that a thought has arisen, and use that awareness to bring the mind back to the breath, back to that open sky-like nature of mind. Watch that thought, that cloud dissolve back into the sky. Not separate, of the same nature. Back to the breath. Watch the thought, the cloud, dissolve into that limitless, calm clarity of mind. Okay. I just want to say, I think it's important to remember. So the thoughts that arise are not different than the mind, different than that sky-like nature, the different than that limitless clarity. Like the metaphor of the cloud, which arises from the sky and just goes back into it without leaving a trace, or like a wave that comes from the ocean and then goes back into the ocean. It's not separate. The thought is the same thing. It's not a separate entity from that clarity of mind. It's just our habitual patterns and our way of, habituating this certain response to the stimuli that kind of freezes and concretizes that moment, into something that we get kind of blinders on or consumed by, a thought that's we get stuck on. And some thoughts are much stickier than others, and what's a sticky thought for me may not be for someone else. But the important thing is, it's not, if we recognize it as mind, then that thought can be kind of loosened and that dissolution can take place. And it's really recognizing it as nature of mind, not separate from it. It's the same thing as recognizing the clarity as your nature of mind. If you can start to work with recognizing thoughts in the same way, it's really, really beneficial to your practice. With that, Victoria has a few words to say.
Exactly to the point of what Michael was saying, I don't really have anything special to say today, but just to bring, to speak about the things we've been talking about the last few times. Just what Michael said, to recognize thoughts, occurrences, perceptions, emotions, judgments, thoughts, not as separate from the mind's nature. It's recognizing that without the space of awareness, these little events or big events, be they sticky or, minor little things that pop up, they're not different. And actually, nothing can really appear without the space in which and the light of cognizance within it, within which it's contained. And that's what we really do when we sit down to meditation. And I just wanted to touch base and remind us, you know, we often speak. First of all, I just want to say, this metaphor that we've heard as students many, many, many times, and the teachers say not to stir consciousness, not to stir. What does that mean? Like you take a clean glass of water and on the bottom is sediment, and the stirring is exactly this arising of thoughts and emotions and judgments and fears, etc., etc. So glass of water with sediment on the bottom, not stirred, just a pure, clean glass of water is what we talk about as the ocean or the sky, just the bare awareness. The clear glass of water is the nature of our awareness. What Karmapa was saying. Why is it difficult to recognize? Is because that glass of clear water, which is a metaphor for our awareness, is always stirred. And so, we often speak about two types of awareness, but they're really not two types of awareness. There are two ways that awareness functions, right? Awareness that goes outward and is captured by objects. And when awareness is captured by object, I see this, I hear this, I feel this. On top of it, there are many other layers. I don't like this, I hate this, I want this, I want more. So then emotions, judgments, and this sense of ego, this compounded idea that sneaks in behind it and tells us, oh, this is my opinion, this is my thought, this is how I feel. And so it kind of gives us this illusory sense of I am the creator of this thought. I am the owner of this thought. And part of it is true and part of it is false because of the myriad interconnectedness of the seeds when they're stirred with the sediment. The sediment are karmic seeds. And when the consciousness looks outward, all the storehouse, all the seeds are activated together with our awareness being pulled out, on top of it being imprisoned into our judgment and into this illusory sense of the ego where we're trapped by identifying with these thoughts, opinions, activities. But the clarity is lost because of that stirring of the sediment. Now, this is one type of consciousness. This is the ability of our consciousness to function in that diluted conceptual manner, where the consciousness is taken away, stirred, and is now concerned solely with objects in the world. Objects can also be thoughts. Objects can also be feelings. And that's where we get stuck. We identify with depression. We identify with fear. We identify, I like this, I don't like this. Because of that false sense of ego, which again, when you examine it, falls apart. Where is it? What is this I? Can I touch it? Can I demonstrate it? Yes, of course, we can always point to the body, but where does the I live inside it? We can point to the brain. Where does the I live inside it? We can't find it. And same like with the thoughts of our taste, of distaste, of likes and dislikes. The only thing we can find are repetitive, habitual patterns. There's nothing more to be found inside them. But in meditation, when the consciousness is turned inward and we're observing mind, last week I used, the analogy of the flame. The flame illuminates everything. So now I can see Michael, I can see my clothes, I can say my hair is gray and it doesn't look good, etc., etc. But when the flame is just watching itself and is aware of its own luminosity, then all the movie of this exterior stirred consciousness can pass by on the screen, but I don't have to be captured into it. I remember, oh, it's my awareness that's allowing these movies to play on the screen of my awareness, but I don't need to be taken out. I don't need to be hijacked by all of this, including not being hijacked with this false identity. These are my thoughts, these are my movies, they're so important. Yeah, they're so important to me, but another person right next to me looks at the same movie and goes, oh, this is baby talk, this is, etc., etc. But think of consciousness as this glass that's unstirred, a candle that's lit, that's not hijacking consciousness to be aware of objects outside, but really the flame looking at its own ability to light all things, looking at lighting itself and looking at itself. Same like the glass of water, not stirred, not contaminated by all these likes and dislikes, by the way, which are all public. None of them are mine. All these stirrings, all these conceptual elaborations, none of them are mine, because these are interconnected through myriad and infinite connections to others, to opinions of others, to cultural things, to linguistic things, to et cetera, et cetera, and then all the emotional layers that are connected to them. That space is public, so we shouldn't ever really think these are mine. Yes, the mind can react to certain things, but even our reactions, I hate this, I'm depressed about this, these are also public space things. There's no mine, really. The only thing that's mine, truly, is when the mind is watching itself, nature watching itself. And in that moment, there is no stirring, there is no sediment. In that space, we never push away thoughts. And that also means when we're meditating or doing it, being aware and ordinary life in the space of activity on the spot, so to say, we are never pushing anything away. And that means that often we have to like really become friends with difficult thoughts, friends with difficult people, so that we can kind of like stop this constant stirring and churning and running out, but mind turned inward. So again, even though we say there are two kinds of awareness, the outward monkey awareness, the inward wisdom awareness. Conceptual mind, wisdom mind, uh, it's not easy, and we have to train that. Mind turned inward, glass of water not stirred, candle not illuminating things out there, candle looking at itself, understanding its own nature, allowing objects and appearances to arise and dissolve, very, very important. Also means that we really do have to become habituated, becoming used to being with difficulties, difficult emotions, difficult thoughts, together, to watch. The reason why we have to become friends with them is so that we can watch them subside. The longer we spend in this kind of non-stirred awareness, the more we become habituated with just the bare space of awareness, its pure, limitless, luminous quality, that can look through the walls, can look through the cities, through the planets, into like infinite open space. And that space can be a little daunting and a little scary, but you know what? It's also the only space, this space of clarity, of unstirred, unemotional, on me, on thought kind of presence, is the only space out of which we can actually act clearly. Because when we are stirred, what rises up? What rises up are fears and prejudices and judgments and the me. What's in it for me? All these kinds of things. I like this, I don't like this. That being stirred, that sediment rising up, is exactly the opposite of anything which we can consider my something that I formulate in freedom, because it's exactly the definition of being unfree, is being like on steroids, with hate, with jealousy, with opinionatedness, with fear, with anxiety, with depression. All of those kinds of states are when the mind is contaminated by my likes and dislikes. And I'm not diminishing any kind of serious emotional things, but emotions are stirring and contamination of the mind's pure awareness. And that sediment on the bottom will only be burnt. All those karmic seeds will only be burnt in, when there is the full attainment of full enlightenment, when our Buddha nature is so clear and obvious. It's like, sunlight that bursts the cave, like the ceiling of the cave is open and the sunlight just like destroys it, being the cave. But until we're seeing partial light, we do meditation sessions, we become habituated to the space of awareness rather than events and the stirrings of awareness. Our consciousness experiences itself more and more as the glass that's not stirred, just that clarity. It is only out of that clarity, when we make decisions out of that clarity, when we act out of that clarity on contaminated water, that we can actually make compassionate decisions, that we can actually make decisions or activate activity. Of course it's going to be contaminated partially no matter what, but if we check ourselves and first it requires like the mental recognition, right? Like a head thing, a thought. Oh, am I stirred, or am I more or less what is called calm abiding, right? What is calm abiding meditation? When the thoughts are not suppressed, but they're not so bright and stirred where we're thrown out there and all activated and reactive, But when the sediment kind of starts to just, it's still there somewhere on the bottom, but our awareness is now bigger and brighter, because all the sediment is now down, 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 and it's lower. the stirring is very minimal, and our clarity is much brighter and bigger. When we can habituate that state, and we can bring that state from sitting down, because like I said, there's no suppressing the thoughts, because when we're suppressing and chasing the thoughts, if we're sitting down to meditate with this hope of a result, I'm going to be thought free, I'm going to be this and this, I'm going to be blissed out, all we're doing is activating our ego and more thoughts, right? We're like creating a superficial, artificial, blank state, but we are just not being honest with ourselves that we're chasing a result, we're chasing a high. We want meditation to be like this experience of bliss that stops all the pain, but it's not what meditation really is. Meditation is something that can absorb all these things, especially difficult things. Because why are things difficult? Because our reactions are very extreme. We have wants and likes and dislikes that are very, very strong. And that's another word for suffering, right? Suffering is, our emotional response, our mental response to different kinds of situations. Suffering is when things get very extreme. Extreme pleasure, and I need more of it. So like the minute it stops, and every time that we experience it, the feeling of pleasure is shorter and shorter, and the need for having more is greater and greater. That's suffering. Things that are difficult people in our life, difficult situation, illness, loss, etc., loneliness, anxiety, all these kinds of things. That's also suffering, but all of those also are seeds where we are triggered and reacting simply to our responses. I'm all alone, the world is terrible, everybody's against me, etc., etc. So changing our mind from this outer consumption with layers of the ego and the emotion and the judgment to this simple, bare state of awareness. I'm just watching. I'm just watching. And I'm not being triggered. Little by little, this movie, because, we're fooled because the movie is just a tiny little bit different tomorrow morning, but so many elements are the same. My taste and all these habitual propensities are like the same, but it's so like 1 degree different, so it makes us feel like something new is happening. There's a new thing on the news, there's a new neighbor, there's a new, I need the new dress, I need the brighter teeth, I need, all this. I got a new wrinkle, it feels like our life is now suddenly all new and fresh, but it's not. It's really not. It's just like regurgitated old opinions. We're just focusing our flame of awareness on tiny little different things. My wrinkle got deeper, I got a spot next to it, my hair is more gray, etc. Not to diminish difficult situations, but again, bringing awareness to the inside, watching the sediment. The more we watch the sediment being internalized, mind watching itself, the more the sediment falls to the bottom. And first we do it with our conceptual mind. We recognize it. We're going, oh, I'm in the middle of hating something. I am all lit up. Watch the mind. So like memory arises. And then we bring that memory to the entirety of the body, right? That's where experience happens. That's like, I'm not just reading about ice cream or I see an ice cream truck go by. This is like, I'm tasting, I know what this thing is. So first the thought, the memory, and then looking inside and seeing how a certain emotion ravages us, where it's making our breath be fast, where our temperature is changing, etc., etc. That body awareness, the full experience is where we know what's happening to us. We watch the movie this way, and then we know, well, you know what? It's all happening within this infinite awareness. And as you watch it, give it a moment before you speak, before you do. Like when a difficult person enters the room, observe yourself. Become free of being this stirred, dirty cup of water and then spill that water onto others. Just withhold, just have patience. practice wisdom and patience. You may still feel all those difficult emotions. You may still feel stirred inside, but when awareness clicks in, and at least so your mind could be stirred, but your speech and your body with activity can be withheld or paused or at least like slowed down. The more you do that, the more you can really watch these states dissolve, because this is just that sediment, and there's no need to identify with it. The more we identify with watching with just bare awareness, and really start to get the recognition that all these stirrings, all this filth that rises up, are just these karmic seeds of my pollution that I've accumulated through countless lifetimes. But the thing is, the trick, the meditation, the efficacy is that if I have enough wisdom and patience, I have enough perseverance, I cultivate those 6 bodhisattva states, I can watch it just dissolve. At least I can get to a point of where I don't have to push it out through my speech and my physical activity, which is only just reactivity. It's not really action. So before we are free to do something, in other words, we're free for, etc., 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 we need to be free from. It's very important. Check yourself, check with your mind and then with your entire body. Am I free from pollution? Am I acting out of this kind of state where I'm not anticipating a response? I don't need to be called, good person, you did so good. I have no desire for an outcome. I just want to act out of clarity. And that is like the closest to where we can actually really exercise any kind of autonomy and freedom. And so, just remember, they're not 2 different separate awarenesses. It's one awareness that could be triggered and function only as this childish, often in Buddhism it's referred to as the monkey, because it jumps from place to place. The wind blows, it goes here. Wind blows, it goes there. All this karmic activity, and it's diluted into thinking these are my thoughts. I am forget the I am the master of the universe. This is all, the master of the universe is here. I am just this bare, simple awareness. I'm watching the movie and letting things dissolve. And I have the patience and I have the clarity. And we make every morning a promise to ourselves that we're going to act from that place of not being stirred. And, that's practice. And that's mind turned inward. That mind turned inward is our only opportunity, is our only chance of any kind of speech and action that comes from some semblance of an autonomous free place. So being free for something requires that we are free from pollution. And so always checking yourself, letting the sediment go down before, and if you know that you're going to walk into a difficult situation, prepare yourself. If you have like a difficult work situation, or you're going home and you're going, oh, my kids are going to scream and my wife is going to tear into me, and prepare yourself to, like, before you open the door, you put the key into the door, prepare your mind, say to yourself, I'm not going to be triggered. Open up your mind, open up that spaciousness of awareness and hear everything without being triggered, without doing this and this, without kind of getting out of that inner world, and that's something within our reach, because again, the mind turned inward, it's not like an invention, it's not a religion, it is our own experience. This is our nature, without which all this monkey mind stuff, cannot happen, because without the luminosity of the mind, without the spaciousness of the mind, we cannot see objects, we cannot hear objects, we cannot hear praise and blame, we cannot experience all those emotional things that come with praise and blame, etc., etc., we cannot be triggered. We just have to remember to turn inward, and that's what practice is.
Thank you. We can go to questions. There's a question. Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar, and in the chat button, Nick has put a link to the most recent of the reviews, detailed reviews of the meditation technique. So we'll go to questions if you have any. Sorry. Okay. How to deal with observing suffering around the world.
May I?
Yeah.
First, to observe suffering in the world is to make sure that we're not doing it out of this stirred place. Because when we do it out of afflictive mental states, we're only adding to that suffering. So that's knowing number one. It's very, very important. You know, these things where we say this is right and this is wrong has a lot to do with our ego makeup. You know, we get attached to certain things and reject other things, not usually out of clarity, but because somewhere, somehow, there's kind of an adherence to one group thought, to another group thought, an emotional kind of discharge that goes with it. So it's very, very important when looking out into the world to look out through the clarity, through a clean glass, through the purity. Then you can take action. And there's many kinds of action that are uncontaminated. Very, very important to really check your mind and your body and to know you're not taking action just because, you know, you're stirred. I mean, listen, sometimes we have to jump into the fire with adrenaline and save somebody's life, you know, but that also comes from like an extreme sense of clarity because, you know, in a moment like that, the ego recedes, even, you know, my own self of sense of safety and pain, etc., recedes, and I know exactly and immediately that comes from like extreme moment of clarity, you know, that kind of a thing where we can put ourselves in danger for the sake of others. You know, that doesn't come out of judgment, you know, what's in it for me kind of thing. But when watching and processing information, watching, processing the world, how it unfolds, very important not to add fuel to the fire. And very important to know that my action is only going to be meaningful if I am myself uncontaminated. Because ultimately, you know, this watching is also trying to quench my own little flame, my own contamination. Let me first, we liberate all sentient beings from our own contaminated mind. And then we can take proper course. You know, we can volunteer, we can do things, you know, and remember, as Buddhist practitioners, we can sit down into like deep meditation practice and do Tonglen. We can do aspirations, pray to the Buddhas. You know, we can order pujas. We can do so many different kinds of things. We can go volunteer and cook meals and help people. We could do all of those things, but it's very important not just to kind of like easily slip into this one group seeing it like this, you know, because we have to be always aware. You know, as Buddhist practitioners, we never think about others, their opinions. They're bad because they don't think like this. These ones are good because they think like this. We never concern ourselves with that. We always and only concern ourselves with our own mind. We always ask ourselves, what is the state of my mind when I'm saying, when I'm speaking out, when I'm acting, the action I take? You know, we have to know the source of this speech and this activity. So whatever we do, we have to first make sure that we're not contaminated and poisoned, because very, very easy to kind of jump into that polluted lake or that polluted lake, and really lose any kind of sense of autonomy and clarity by not checking. Very easy for, like, when people say righteous this and righteous that, there is no righteous anything. We're either deluded or we have some modicum of clarity. And whenever we're contaminated, like when our feelings are all like this, and our stomach is like this, we check our mind and our body. Is our thoughts racing crazy through our mind, and we're going, yes, he's right, this one is wrong, this one is right? Or are we, and our body is also like tense, and we feel like sick energy moving through us in our stomach, in our heart, our breath is hard, it's heavy, it's hot. We have to make sure that we know the source of our activity of body, speech, and mind.
Very good answer. Do you think it's important to meditate more than once a day? As a serious practitioner, how many times do you recommend meditating every day? The most important thing is to begin a habit of meditating. Actually, the word meditation in Tibetan is gom, right? Which means habituate, to
Yes.
habituate.
Yes.
Habituate what? Habituate this kind of, basically what we've been talking about all day, that this kind of experience of calming the mind and letting these thoughts settle and things like that. So the most important thing is to develop that as a regular practice, and integrating it into your life as something that you do on a very regular basis. Once a day, twice a day, I mean, that's really up to you and how you feel, but the most important thing is to start to, do it as regularly as possible. It's very individual, just saying it's good to do it twice a day in the morning, and it's really up to you, and you have to find what works. Sometimes when we make too much of a big decision, like I'm going to get in shape, I'm going to go to the gym 2 hours in the morning and 1 hour at night, and then it's such a big commitment that you've made, and you can't really commit to it, that you stop going at all because you feel like a fail. I don't have 2 hours to spare. I'll do it tomorrow. Instead of just saying, I'm going to go to the gym for 20 minutes. And then you might be able to go like, 5 or 6 days a week, and maybe you'll expand it more as you feel better, or maybe that'll be enough. But it's like, let's, start with consistency is really the most important rather than frequency. I think that's a really important thing.
And I think what's also very important, there is no question about what Michael said, habituating the mind. The mind is like a dog, it needs to be trained, and that's what we do. Practice means training the mind. It's not making opinions about others and, throwing judgment, watching the mind. So it's extremely important to try to do it every day at the same time, whether it's 15 minutes, 3 hours, whatever you can do. But it's also the other thing that I personally think that's important is that it's done at a time when you have really mental quietness, where you don't have to do this and this and this. For example, when we were raising 3 children, we would get up before taking the kids to school several hours before that, so kind of like habituated to very, very early morning meditation. It doesn't matter at night or in the morning, just find a space. Maybe after work is better for you. Find some space, or your lunch hour where you have this hour, or whatever is good. Just find the time that's kind of disconnected from the worldly. I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do, like, give yourself the hour on a regular basis. And that hour will become so sacred, that time, that eventually, like this, I have to, this rushing out, the mind outward, will kind of diminish a lot. It'll be your sacred time when the mind knows it's time. And then you bring the flavor of that, like reconnecting to that many, many times throughout the day. That's very important.
I often find myself in mental habits of questioning the nature of God. I spend time in 12-step meetings where God is talked of often and is described as an other, in quotes, but I feel it is just a projection of the mind and an external other to sort things out. Then again, I have also found myself remarkably blessed, and finding myself in fortunate coincidences. Where is God found within Buddhism? That's a really big question. When compared to other religions, me personally, I don't really consider Buddhism a religion. There's really nothing religious that what we've spoke of today. Basically, we're talking about working with our mind. I don't really find that to be religious. Buddhism does not talk about an external or a God, omniscient God that's a creator of the universe that has this kind of omniscience and omnipotence. Um, Even when we talk, and Buddha's not a god or worshipped as a god or has these supernatural qualities, and when we talk about nature and mind, we're talking about our own Buddha nature, meaning we have the same mind as Buddha. It's not like he's God and he's going to help us. We have to help us. I mean, he points the direction through his teachings, and we're fortunate to have the teachings as a map to get to our own Buddha nature. But you know, our mind and the nature of the mind of all sentient beings, that includes animals and insects and everything, is the same as Buddha's mind. Same. That said, Tsoknyi Rinpoche, who's a very great Tibetan Buddhist Lama, Tsoknyi Rinpoche, has several good books on Buddhism, which we should put on the list, Nick, because he's great. Once said, was asked that same question, and he said, well, in Buddhism, we don't believe in the concept of God, but we do have a sense of the nature of God. And what my interpretation of that is, when we talk about shunyata and emptiness and this kind of complete interdependence and the fact that a self, an inherently existing separate self, is an illusion, and the true nature of reality is this kind of universal, absolute universal oneness. That is a similar flavor of the nature of God in a way. But the concept of a God in, say, Catholic religion, which I was brought up in, as being this, creator of heaven and earth and the universe, and like this almost like, you know, being that has the will to do these things and, omnipotence and stuff. That's not the same thing as in Buddhism. Um, and the last part of your question, saying I found myself remarkably blessed and finding myself in remarkable fortunate coincidences from a Buddhist perspective. If the positive things and the fortune that we find in our lives, if we do find that, in Buddhist perspective, it says that that's a result of positive karma that was created, cultivated through positive activities in this lifetime or prior ones. So I hope that helps.
Look at it this way. God is a concept. It may be like the highest of the pyramid of all the concepts of the conceptual mind. It incorporates these kinds of greatest of our, conceptual artworks, so to say. Love, compassion, purity, etc., etc. And then, of course, human beings, as polluted as we are, we also like to attribute other qualities to God, to this, the pinnacle of the pyramid of ideas. We like to say that God is wrathful and he'll punish you, etc., etc. These are all concepts. This is not to dissuade anyone's belief. This is only to say concepts are labels, and underneath them are qualities which we project into like a certain conceptual structure. In this case, during the time of enlightenment, God was also called the first cause, the absolute. For more abstract thinkers, the first cause. For more mechanical thinkers, in terms of creation, etc., etc. But think of it like this, and in Buddhism, by the way, we also have a lot of gods, deities, we call them deities, as a meditative help. because it is understood in Buddhism that conceptual mind of a practitioner, like anyone's conceptual dualistic mind, still needs help. But we refer to these deities in two ways, you know. We think of them as our teachers or Buddhas, you know, persons like us who have, or like all of us, you know, who went from ignorance of dualistic mind to full enlightenment, where their quality now, the quality of their mind, Buddha mind, is wisdom and compassion.
People like us, not meaning that we are.
Yeah. I mean, they're all sentient beings, including insects, animals, and all the other realms, you know. We all sentient beings, you know, have the same Buddha mind quality, and when it blossoms, we can refer to, we use Buddha sometimes as a deity, but it is always understood. That's why, like in Vajrayana Buddhism, when we practice, we do creation stage, so we can sometimes speak to the Buddha, please, or to our teacher we aspire. May my mind be moist with kindness. May I never, do any wrong, never sow any negative karmic seeds, etc., etc. And then we do the solution so that we always understand that we've created all these conceptual structures, like a structure, a concept of a deity, structure, concept of a God. We have to dissolve that so that we just remember that mind has infinite quality of wisdom and compassion, and it does not need to have form. And by the way, when we speak of emptiness, we mean emptiness of concrete existence, of concrete definition, of this concreteness, because anything that has this kind of like singularity can no longer be infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, unpolluted, undiluted, etc., etc. So always kind of like understanding it. This concept of God is a very helpful thing, because that's like a repository of where I think of all the purest, highest qualities. But then remembering true achievement, true accomplishment, the Buddha, when the mind just becomes illuminated, does not rely on dualistic structure, experiences directly wisdom, luminosity, and compassion without these restraints of concepts and, or visual, visual aids, what we call, skillful methods. All those things are considered techniques in Buddhism, relying on these pure beings. Our teacher always tells us, don't think of you and I are separate. I am here, you are here. He said, just be one with my mind. And that, of course, has that quality of neither myself nor him. These barriers become extinguished, then it's, you can touch a mind quality of a realized being like our teacher Garchen Rinpoche with your mind, but in that dissolve all these kinds of particular conceptual physical structures.
There's a few questions about starter books. Okay, on the Solidago Productions website, which you use to register, there's a list of books and teachers, and not only do we recommend reading these books, but we recommend. We're not Dharma teachers, but if any of this, you connect with any of these teachings to really find the authentic teachers from the authentic lineages. Some of them are on this website. They have their own websites and YouTube channels. You can watch their teachings on YouTube. Many of them you can attend their teachings in person. You can read their books, and we encourage you to make connections to this living wisdom tradition. A good starter book, The Power of Mind by Khenpo Lodro Taye Rinpoche. That's on the list. You can find it.
A really good book.
I got into a fight with my partner before the session. I needed some space and I lashed out because I didn't receive it. How do we calm our mind and seek out meditation in a way that's not ego, gratification, erratic emotion affirming? Well, you lashed out because that's your habitual tendency, when you feel you're not given space. But there's other ways to behave in that situation, and that can come from the practice of meditation, where you're learning to work with your own mind, I mean, Victoria said in her talk earlier, when you're going into certain situations, prepare for them, you know. So if you know that at 11 o'clock on Sundays you're going to do this meditation, you can prepare yourself or your partner and say, this is really important to me. I want to do this. So, please know I want to, have that hour to do this practice. And, you know, uh, often when we start something new, we get very gung ho and feel everyone has to kind of cater to our whims because this is important to us. But find an equanimity, find a way of doing this, gently and with understanding and compassion, and um, rather than just feel like this person should automatically know this is important to me and get out of my way. You know, bring mindfulness into the communication between yourself and your partner. I think that's um, and you have to become aware what you're doing here. That maybe you're seeking out. Not, I don't think you're seeking out meditation for ego gratification, but you're the idea of carving out your space somehow is connected to that, and you get defensive there. At least that's what I'm gathering from here. And with awareness and mindfulness, that still may come up, but you won't have that habitual response of lashing out necessarily.
And Buddhism always talks about skillful means. So at the end of the practice, say thank you, have some gratitude, tell your partner how it was important and how graceful and gracious it was for him or her to give space. And next time on the next session, before the session starts, do something nice. Bring make a cup of tea, have a little chat and acknowledge, that generosity. Make that person feel like they're giving you that space on their own, rather than grab it from them. These are skillful means. This is all a part of practice. This is responding to the earlier question, how do you watch the suffering of the world? Well, you don't. You respond to it, but you have to respond to it without pollution, and that's very important. And if next time, you may have this resistance, maybe that person wants to have more time with you and feel like they're being deprived, give them something ahead of time, and afterwards also acknowledge and tell them how beautiful and generous and patient they were, that they were able to give you this time. That's very important for you. And it's important for you both, because ultimately, when the person sees that you are changed, you undergo certain transformations as a result of practice, they'll want to give you that time because it benefits you both.
Um, is it wrong to cut people out of your life if they consistently elicit a bad reaction from you, no matter how you try to proceed with clarity? That's a tricky question, right? Because if you have a kid and they consistently elicit a bad reaction, say anger or frustration, for you to cut them out of your life because you want kind of peace of mind is, uh, you know, that's pretty serious and pretty, negative karma and, destructive and very selfish, right? When it's a different situation where it's someone, maybe a friend or even, an adult family member, say that's not so dependent on you. Like if you're the caregiver for your mother and she annoys you and you decide to cut her out of your life, and whatever happens to her, what it happens, again, that's, this a similar thing. But if it's more like friendships or other family members that are not necessarily reliant that way on their well-being and their lives are directly entwined with yours, yeah, boundaries are good. Boundaries are important because often it's about habitual tendencies that we've kind of become enmeshed with and constantly eliciting these negative reactions, and sometimes we need to make a boundary and just say, I don't need this anymore, this kind of emotional negativity. But it helps to have some kind of clarity and awareness of why you're doing that, rather than just it being out of convenience, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And, also just acknowledging for ourselves that sometimes for a portion of our life, we go together on the same path with certain person, and then, our life goes in one direction, and not, and their life stays or goes in another direction. When, as Michael said, if it's not this kind of a karmic fold that's based on ego, I need this, and so at any cost type of a thing. But if it is a friend, with whom you feel like the course has run its way and there's some kind of a repetitive negativity, sometimes people feel like your life is going in another direction. You're becoming more aware. You want to be kinder, softer. You want to have a bigger heart, while they're hardened in these kinds of like, opinions that are, based on fear and, public ignorance and all this kind of stuff. Then of course, yes, because, we should seek, relationships which bring us closer to clarity, which allow for more kindness to blossom, and yes, of course, it's only natural that sometimes, we of course, when we no longer see certain people, we wish them all the best, but we've all left, childhood friends and have done so, and there's no reason why as adults we cannot do the same thing, as long as Michael said it's done with clarity and, in you know from a good basis.
Okay, last question. Regarding frequency of meditation, in addition to formal daily sitting practice, my teacher recommends informal short moments many times.
Yes.
Um, do you practice these short moments? I mean, you could also do formal sitting practice in short moments many times too. I mean, you can, sit on your cushion in your if you have a shrine area or something like that, for 2 minutes or 5 minutes or something like that. You can do that as well. Um, Short moments many times is good. A lot of teachers recommend that. That can be very valuable. In the daily life, though, you, especially if you're new to meditation, but even if you're not, we have to be careful with like, oh, I meditate when I, take a walk in the park, or I meditate in the bathtub, or I meditate, um, when I'm lying down or something like that. Be careful with that because those activities may have a meditative quality to them. It's relaxing to take a bath. It calms you down. It's taking a walk in the park can be something very meditative, you could say, in terms of it being relaxing and calming. But often it could be taking a bath is taking a bath. It's not necessarily meditation. You know what I mean? Walking in the taking a walk is often taking a walk. It's different than meditation. So bringing your mindfulness into these daily activities really has to come from a very, I think, regular, consistent foundation of formal sitting practice. Without that, we can kind of confuse a meditative activity for meditation practice in general. I hope that makes sense, but it's an important distinction to make.
Yeah, and again, it's like this mind and body scan. And every time that you feel a stirring, you should, mind turned inward is a mind that knows I'm polluted, I'm affected, I'm afflicted, my breath is strong, I feel hot, I want to say some, always in those moments, checking yourself, being your own doctor, being your own teacher, shedding, putting on the lamp of awareness and bringing that down. So, yes, as your teacher said, having that awareness many, many times a day, especially when you feel things are off and running, bringing back awareness, controlling how much we, step out of these boundaries of being aware, catching ourselves, many, many times a day is what actually, that's why we sit to meditate, and we're supposed to bring that into everything we do. But as Michael said, just, really understanding, uh, meditation as a technique, as something that we do to cultivate and habituate knowing the space of awareness rather than the activity, all the external stuff that the awareness does.
Okay, I remember in the chat button is a link to the basic technique, the last video where we really go in detail about the basic technique for meditation. And thank you, Nick Solidago, our producer, who
Thank you,
makes this
Nick.
possible out of his generosity and kindness. And let's dedicate the merit, any merit that had been generated from today's class to the benefit of all beings, and really connect to the word all beings, and connect to all beings as something not separate from you. Connect to all beings as part of this kind of universal fabric energy field that is really the true nature of existence. By this merit may all beings attain the state of enlightenment and conquer the enemies of faults and delusions. May they be liberated from this ocean of samsara and its pounding waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death. See you next week.